My friends, there is a peculiar silence that arises in the presence of great emotional pain. It is not merely the absence of noise, but rather the quieting of the ego's chatter, the collapse of its false certainties. In that space of devastation, where the carefully constructed image of the self begins to disintegrate, the so long ignored and exiled finds the conditions necessary to speak. Most people run from pain, for it disturbs the habitual narrative of control. But I say this: pain, when it is consciously embraced, becomes the alchemical fire in which the ego is dissolved and the deeper self revealed. We must learn to regard emotional suffering not as a pathology to be eradicated, but as a summons from the unconscious, a signal that the outer life is no longer aligned with the inner truth. In this way, suffering is not meaningless. It becomes a messenger, though often disguised in terrifying forms. Each wound that life inflicts upon us invites the possibility of transformation, if only we are brave enough to turn toward it rather than away. The wound is the place through which the unconscious pierces the illusion of surface existence and demands our attention. There is a spiritual principle buried deep within this process, and it is this: only in the darkness do we begin to see the light that was hidden beneath the superficial brightness of persona. The personatha social mask we wear's no answer for soul pain. It cannot cope with despair, heartbreak, or betrayal. Thus, when emotional suffering tears through that mask, it is not merely a loss, it is a sacred moment, a rupture, a chance for the real self, the archetypal core of the psyche, to begin its slow emergence from the prison of unconsciousness. To suffer consciously is to become an initiate in the mystery of individuation. That is the path to which emotional pain points. And so, I urge you, do not anesthetize your pain with distraction or noise. Do not flee into false positivity or hollow affirmation. Instead, listen. Ask what it wants from you. For every deep wound, if held consciously, is the potential birth canal of a new self. The pain does not come to destroy you, it comes to reintroduce you to your soul. What most people call emotional pain is often the cry of the rejected parts of the self, the so-called shadow. These are not monsters born in some alien realm. They are aspects of our own psyche, pushed into the darkness because they did not fit the image we wish to present to the world. We are taught to show our strength, our virtue, our success. But behind that mask live the unloved, unspoken, and unresolved fragments of the self. And it is these exiled elements that rise up in times of emotional turmoil to demand recognition. You must understand, the shadow is not evil, it is repressed, and repression breeds suffering. When you feel unexplainable anger, depression, jealousy, or despair, you are often encountering your own shadow knocking on the doors of consciousness with increasing force. The longer it is ignored, the louder it becomes, until it breaks through as anxiety, addiction, or emotional breakdown. But when we turn toward it not with condemnation, but with curiosity, we begin to see that what we once feared is, in fact, part of our wholeness. The spiritual principle here is this: the light does not overcome the darkness by destroying it, but by illuminating it. We do not heal by denying our pain or suppressing our flaws. We heal by bringing them into consciousness, integrating them into the totality of our being. The shadow, when confronted with compassion, becomes a source of energy, creativity, and inner strength. It contains the very vitality that the ego has tried to exclude in its pursuit of perfection, but perfection is death to the soul. It is wholeness we must seek. So I say to you, approach your shadow with reverence. Let your emotional pain guide you to the places where you are not yet whole. Do not be afraid of the parts of you that suffer, for they are only waiting to be brought into the light. Every tear you shed in the presence of your shadow is not a sign of weakness, it is the beginning of healing. It is the sacred act of reclaiming your inner truth from the prison of shame and silence. This, my friends, is how the cycle of emotional pain begins to dissolve through conscious encounter with the forgotten self. The cycle of emotional pain persists because the psyche resists its own maturation. It clings to old patterns, childhood defenses, and collective norms in a desperate attempt to maintain comfort. But the soul is not interested in comfort, it is interested in wholeness. And the process by which the soul seeks that wholeness is what I have called individuation, the journey of becoming what you truly are, beyond persona, beyond shadow, beyond the conditioned self. This process is not gentle, it is often violent, for it tears apart the illusions we have mistaken for truth. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is not the polishing of the ego or the achievement of ideals. It is the confrontation with the totality of the self, including those aspects we have been taught to despise. Every emotional wound is, in this sense, a summons-an invitation to journey inward and confront the contradictions that live within. Pain breaks us only when we resist its deeper purpose. When we surrender to it consciously, it becomes a guide, a signpost toward integration, and integration is the soul's deepest yearning. The spiritual principle here is simple yet radical. Wholeness is more healing than perfection. In our woundedness, we are often seeking to become good, acceptable, or loved. But the soul is not seeking morality, it is seeking truth. And truth includes the darkness as well as the light. The person who integrates their anger, fear, and longing into conscious awareness becomes more than healed, they become authentic. And authenticity, in the deepest sense, is liberation. Thus, individuation is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Without it, the soul withers, trapped in a cycle of repressed wounds and unconscious projections. But when we engage the process with reverence, when we allow our pain to become a portal rather than a prison, we enter into the sacred rhythm of the self's unfolding. We move from fragmentation to unity. And in that movement, the cycle of emotional pain begins to give way to the light of inner truth. At the center of much suffering lies a profound illusion that the ego is the master of the house. The ego, or conscious identity, shaped by upbringing and culture, believes it can control life, dictate the terms of happiness, and avoid suffering through cleverness or willpower. But this is a dangerous fantasy. Life is not subject to the ego's demands. It moves according to deeper rhythms, archetypal, mysterious, unconscious. When we resist these rhythms, we suffer. And when suffering arrives, the ego sees it as failure rather than initiation. Emotional pain exposes the limits of the ego's power. It humbles us. It reminds us that there are forces within us and around us that cannot be managed through logic or discipline alone. The pain that overwhelms the ego is not a punishment, it is a correction. It says, "You are not whole. You are not listening. You are not yet aligned with the self, the deeper center of the psyche." In this way, suffering is not the enemy, it is the teacher. It breaks the illusion of control so that something deeper can emerge. The spiritual principle hidden here is profound. You must die to the ego in order to awaken to the self. This is a spiritual death, not a physical one, the death of pride, of certainty, of rigidity. When we surrender our need to dominate life, we make space for the deeper self to guide us. This self is not subject to the chaos of emotion or the tyranny of reason. It is rooted in the eternal, the archetypal, the divine within. When we touch it, we know peace not as a mood, but as a state of being. Thus, emotional pain is often the soul's rebellion against the ego's tyranny. When your plans fall apart, when your identity crumbles, when your heart breaks, it may be that life is removing what no longer serves your evolution. In that destruction lies the opportunity for spiritual rebirth. if you are brave enough to let go of control, if you are humble enough to listen, the very pain that shattered your ego may become the womb of your true becoming. Every deep emotional experience is, in truth, an archetypal event. It touches not only the personal psyche, but the collective unconscious, the timeless domain of human experience shared by all. When we grieve, rage, despair, or long for something beyond the visible, we are not merely reacting to circumstance. We are reenacting ancient patterns: the hero's fall, the exile's sorrow, the lover's loss, the seeker's longing. These patterns are eternal. And when we become conscious of them, our suffering is no longer meaningless, it becomes mythic. To suffer is to be initiated, and initiation always involves a death and a rebirth. In tribal cultures, initiation was ritualized, but in the modern world, it often takes the form of psychic breakdown. The pain that disrupts our lives is not just random chaos, it is the threshold between the old self and the new. If we recognize the archetypal dimensions of our pain, we can endure it with dignity. We can participate consciously in the transformation, rather than being broken unconsciously by it. The spiritual principle here is ancient and sacred. Every wound is a rite of passage. You must descend into the underworld of your psyche in order to reclaim your soul. And like all great myths, there will be monsters to face your fears, regrets, self-hatred, and unmet needs. But if you walk that path with awareness, if you endure the fire of truth, you will emerge not as who you were, but as who you are becoming. This is the hero's journey, and every soul must take it. So I urge you, when pain arrives, ask not, why me, but what is this initiating in me? Do not seek merely to escape the suffering. Seek to understand its purpose. For if you enter it consciously, if you walk the dark forest with open eyes, you may find that the path you feared was in fact the sacred road back to your own divine center. Most people, when they suffer, seek only to end the pain. They numb it, avoid it, rationalize it. But the psyche does not heal through avoidance. It heals through conscious suffering. To suffer consciously is to witness the pain without collapsing into it. It is to experience the depths of emotion with full presence, without repression and without indulgence. This is not a passive process, it is a sacred act of inner work. For in every moment of conscious suffering, the self is watching, shaping, refining. The unconscious thrives on what is unacknowledged. When pain remains in the shadows, it governs us from below, driving compulsions, distortions, and despair. But when we hold our pain in the light of awareness, when we allow ourselves to feel fully, without judgment, we begin to transmute it. What was once a torment becomes a source of clarity. Suffering that is witnessed, named, and honored becomes transformation. This is the path of the alchemist, who turns lead into gold. The spiritual principle here is this: what we feel fully, we can finally release. Emotional pain is not permanent. It persists only when we resist it or make it unconscious. By facing it directly, with open heart and courageous mind, we allow the psyche to complete its natural process. The soul does not demand perfection, it demands presence. And presence in pain is the crucible in which deeper truths are revealed. So I tell you, when the storm of emotion comes, do not run, do not hide. Sit with it. Ask what it needs from you. Let it teach you. For every wave of sorrow, every pang of grief, every ache of longing is a door. A door that, if entered with awareness, leads to greater self-knowledge, compassion, and inner peace. This is the way out, not by bypassing pain, but by going through it with your eyes open. A great deal of emotional suffering arises not from events themselves, but from the inner material we unconsciously project onto others. What we cannot face within, we see in the world around us. The hostile father, the unavailable lover, the critical friend. They may indeed be flawed, but often they are also mirrors, reflecting our own wounded self-perceptions. Projection is the psyche's attempt to make the unconscious conscious through the theater of relationship. To break the cycle of emotional pain, we must retrieve our projections. We must recognize that the enemy without is often the exiled self within. When you hate someone with irrational intensity, when you are consumed with blame or obsession, ask, what part of me have I cast into this other? What part of my own soul have I rejected so completely that I now see it as foreign, dangerous, or shameful? This inquiry is not comfortable, but it is essential for healing. The spiritual principle here is deeply humbling. The outer world reflects the inner world. You are not merely reacting to others, you are encountering yourself. Every painful relationship, every triggering encounter, every disappointment may be an invitation to reclaim a disowned part of your psyche. The other becomes the teacher not by intention, but by reflection. And if we have the courage to take back these projections, we reclaim our power, our wholeness, and our freedom. Thus, when emotional pain arises in relationships, do not simply ask, what did they do to me? Ask also, what am I being shown about myself? This does not excuse, abuse, or justify harm, but it does shift your focus from blame to growth. For in the end, every soul you meet is a mirror, and only by learning to see yourself in that reflection can you begin to dissolve the patterns of suffering that have ruled your inner life. In our dreams, the unconscious speaks in a language older than words, the language of symbol, image, and myth. While the ego sleeps, the soul remembers. Emotional pain, when unexpressed in waking life, often erupts in the dream world as shadow figures, impossible scenarios, or overwhelming emotions. These dreams are not meaningless, they are messages. And when we learn to interpret them, we begin to understand what the psyche is truly asking of us. A dream of drowning may reflect the repression of grief. A dream of fire may symbolize suppressed rage or the need for purification. A dream of a lost child may point to the forgotten, neglected aspects of the self. These are not just fantasies, they are sacred stories, authored by your deeper self. And in every symbol lies a key to transformation. Dreams do not lie, they reveal. But they require your participation, your attention, your willingness to see beyond the surface. The spiritual principle is this: what the ego forgets, the soul remembers in dreams. By paying attention to your dreams, writing them down, contemplating them, working with their images, you build a bridge between the conscious and unconscious minds. This bridge becomes a channel for healing, insight, and integration. What is unresolved by day may be resolved in the quiet hours of night, if only you are willing to listen. So I say to you, honor your dreams. Do not dismiss them as nonsense or fear them as omens. They are the whispers of the soul, speaking the truth that the ego cannot yet bear. They show you the map of your own transformation if you are willing to follow their signs. In your darkest nights, your dreams may be your truest guides. In every human being there is a center that is not wounded, not fragmented, not confused. It is not the ego, it is not the personality shaped by society. It is what I call the self, the totality of the psyche, the union of conscious and unconscious, the archetypal image of wholeness. The self is not created, it is discovered. And emotional pain, paradoxically, is one of its primary signposts. When everything we thought we were collapses, when the persona shatters, we are left face to face with the deeper mystery of our being. The self is not an idea, it is a living presence within you. It appears in dreams as wise figures, mandalas, or animals of power. It appears in waking life as sudden intuition, moments of stillness, or the deep certainty that something greater within you knows the way forward. When you align with the self, You no longer feel at war with life. You begin to sense that even suffering has a purpose, that every wound is shaping you not arbitrarily, but according to an inner necessity. The spiritual principle here is profound. You are more than your pain, and yet your pain is part of your becoming. The self does not erase the wound, it redeems it. It takes the broken fragments of the ego and rearranges them into a deeper order, an inner harmony that could not be reached by will or intellect alone. And when this happens, the pain that once enslaved you becomes the very path that leads you to freedom. So when you are in the depths of despair, remember this: you are not alone in your suffering. The self is with you, quiet, unwavering, eternal. It does not shout, it whispers. And if you listen, if you make space for silence within, you may begin to feel its guidance. This is not the end of your story, it is the turning, and the self is the compass that will lead you home. In the end, all true healing is grounded in love, not romantic love, not sentimental attachment, but the fierce, unconditional love of the self for the soul. This love does not eliminate pain, it embraces it. It does not deny the darkness, it integrates it. Love, in the spiritual sense, is the capacity to hold all parts of oneself, the joyful and the sorrowful, the noble and the shameful, the strong and the broken with equal compassion. This is the love that liberates. To break the cycle of emotional pain is not to fix the past or erase the wounds, it is to turn toward oneself with radical acceptance, to say, yes, I have suffered, yes, I have failed, yes, I have feared, and yet I am worthy, I am whole. I am not the wound, I am the one who holds it. In this act of loving witness, transformation begins. The psyche no longer fights itself. The war ends. And in its place comes peace, not because the pain is gone, but because it has been integrated. The spiritual principle here is both the simplest and the most difficult. You must learn to love what hurts. Not in a masochistic way, but in a wise, mature, spiritual way. To hold your grief as a teacher, to cradle your shame as a child who has been left too long in the dark, to forgive the parts of you that did not know better, and to welcome them home. Love is the container in which all opposites are reconciled, and in that sacred container, the psyche begins to heal. So I leave you with this: do not seek escape from your pain. Seek understanding, seek integration, and above all, seek love not outside of you, but within. For when the soul is bathed in the light of its own love, the wounds cease to be prisons. They become passages to depth, to purpose, to God, and in this, the cycle ends. The journey does not, but the suffering transforms, and you, at last, become whole. It is not perfection that heals, it is truth. It is not escape that brings peace, it is embodiment. And it is not fear that guides us, homite is love. Be not afraid of your wounds. They are where the light enters.